we have an excess of unused labor. It's not like we lack labor. What we lack is like really meaningful work for people to do that they can feel good about and that can give them fulfilling lives. So we need to figure out how to be able to teach people those skills and reward them. Reward farmers who adopt soil building techniques instead of soil destruction techniques, so that they can live decent lives. And that goes into big, perhaps, economic changes.
Well, at the very least,
yeah.
government policies, because they're completely skewed the opposite direction.
There is an organization called Carbon Farmers of America, and you can Google it on the web. There's a group of them that are really working on this question and funding research to find out what are the best practices for large-scale building of soil and how can we possibly fund that. And if people are interested, I recommend you look at that.
Cool.
And on a smaller level, I mean, it doesn't take a lot to have a compost pile. And in truth, it's not terribly labor intensive.
No, not at all.
Particularly if you'd compost the way I do, which is the lazy way, right? Not the go out and turn it all the time, but the build it up and let it rot down, And that's the nice thing about nature. In nature, there's nothing, it's not hard to get things to rot and turn into compost because that's what they naturally want to do. It's really hard to prevent them from rotting. Climate change, or climate weirding, as you like to call it, it's a huge challenge for us. What we're faced with right now really is the challenge of enormous large-scale transformation of our economies, of our food-growing systems, of our energy systems, our technology, our production systems, fast. We don't have the luxury of doing it slowly over time because we really desperately need to reduce our carbon emissions as quickly as possible. Scientists, the reliable science now tells us that we need to keep the warming to about 2 degrees centigrade if we're going to avoid the worst kinds of destabilizations and collapse of life support systems across the planet. And to do that, we need to keep the parts per million of carbon around 350. It's currently around 385. We really need to bring it down. And to do that, the most reliable estimates is a country like the United States, which is one of the biggest producers of carbon, needs to reduce our carbon footprint by 90% by the year 2050. And the sooner we do it, the better. We probably can't do that reduction immediately all at once, but the sooner we do big chunks of it, the less carbon gets into the atmosphere altogether, and the more chance we'll have of coming through this with some kind of stability and biodiversity intact. So people need to understand that this isn't about what we should do in 10 years or in 20 years or when the government gets around to it. This is really, we are out of time. We got to do it now. And that transformation seems huge and enormous, but a lot of it is exactly what we need to do anyway to actually create lives for ourselves that are healthier, to get food for ourselves that's actually healthy and nourishing instead of the massive amounts of sort of non-food, junk food that we currently eat in this country. To, again, reroute our industries and our enterprises in communities instead of allowing them to roam the globe in search of the lowest labor costs and the most lax environmental standards. To build soil that is going to improve again, our health, our agriculture, our water cycles, our life cycles. It's all the stuff that we need to do anyway is the stuff that we need to do for climate change.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it seems like that's an important message, because if you just focus on global climate change, people start to want to close their eyes and their ears because it's very scary.
It is very scary.
As opposed to looking at the fact that this will create better lives for the vast majority of us.
It is very scary, and I will say a lot of my dear environmental friends and allies and colleagues have a tendency to become sort of environmental moralists. We must all go back to the ascetic, mea culpa, hair shirt kind of lifestyle. It's not about that. It's about, again, shifting our values away from thinking that more and more stuff is going to make us happy to realizing that it's the quality of our relationships that make us happy. And if we nurture those relationships on every level, from our relationship to the soil, to the food, to the people that we know, to the work that we do, then that is what makes for a healthier world and a healthier community and a healthier psyche. I think it's important for people to know this is doable. There is no technological barrier to doing it right now. We don't need some fantastic new technology, although that's always great. But we have technologies already, solar and wind and many, many other renewable technologies that are already in place. We don't need fancy new nukes, which aren't going to come online anyway for 10, 20, 30 years if they're built safely.
Which we do hope they will be built safely if they were built.
Yeah, right. And which, even if they are built safely, involve horrific forms of uranium mining and toxins and other things. But we have, like I said, we have solar, we have wind, we have conservation. If we had continued to save energy at the rate that we were doing it in the 1970s during the oil crisis, the U.S. would be energy independent today. And even in places like California, where I come from, our gross domestic product has increased enormously. Our population has increased enormously since the late 70s. But our energy use has remained pretty flat, not because of any great sacrifices, but because of increases in efficiency. And with that, coupled with some awareness of conservation, can do a huge amount of the reduction that we need to do. A lot of what we're doing now is waste, and it's wastefulness. Again, pollution is an unused resource. If we find ways to turn those things that are pollutants into resources, then we can create enormous amounts of abundance, real abundance, as we make this transformation. And so I think people have to know we can do it. There's no barrier to doing it. The barrier is not technological. It's political and it's economic. It's vested interests who are so short-sighted that they seem to have forgotten they live in the same world as the rest of us.
Right.
And are fighting this tooth and nail because they are afraid to change. And they believe somehow they have a right to not change and continue to reap profits at the expense of all the rest of us.
And ultimately at their own expense.
Ultimately at the expense of their lives and their children's, their
right.
grandchildren who have to live on this planet too.
Right.
So if we get our political will together, if we educate ourselves around what the solutions are, and if we push for them, we can make that transformation.